Greetings, this is Terra Illumination. I have an impromptu video here for you. It's the 25th of August 2023. The last few days have left me kind of transfixed with some of my observations. And I predicted about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, that we would be living through a profound shift and change. Very similar to the shift in tectonic plates that happens across Earth all day, every day. I'll show you in a moment. But the shift in the geographical, geological tectonic plates is just another shift, because it happens with people, it happens with evolution, it happens with our biology, with microorganisms, with mountains, with oceans, with animals, with plants. Every atom on this little place, our home planet Earth, is affected by the geomagnetic influences of our solar system and our sun. And we adapt accordingly. One of the things I talk about with my friend Love Triber, some of you know she's very popular on the channel and she's been with us a long time. I often have told these stories about, well, what happens when you put, mice in a cage and you feed them, and then you feed them, and you feed them. Well, you get to a point kind of where we are today, where you get what amounts to an overpopulation. Right now, there's always been, let's say, overpopulations of certain kinds. But today we have 8 billion people and counting. It's probably going to creep up to 9, then 10, and 11 billion, which will be an astronomical number of people at the point which the whole system starts to break down. Very similar to the mice experiments that she was telling me about. It gets pretty scary. Like even now today, we have about 8 billion people here, and some of them that are suffering the most are in certain countries around here, and here, and here, and here. Other places too, but I'm talking about more like geological suffering from things like cold, drought, flooding, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, and things that are really, really painful. And if you track what I track, you'll see it's affecting tens, hundreds of millions of people. Many have lost their lives, their homes, their families, their businesses, their crops, their animals. It's really frightening. You're not going to see it reported here on American mainstream type news. But anyway, it is happening. And it's very similar to the experiments she described, which I was already describing, but we affirmed each other. This is what happens when you put rats in a cage. You start with a very small number of very fertile little boy and girl rats or mice, and you feed them. And you give them a nice big playpen, a big home where they can roam around and do whatever they want. There's no exterior predators like cats or eagles. And as you can imagine, they populate and populate and populate, and they expand their population almost exponentially till they reach a point where there's so many little rodents that they start turning on each other using violence, extreme violence, and it gets to the point where things get hopeless, and quite a large percentage just go away and hide and die. Some of them cluster into little balls, and they try and stay warm and comfort each other, trying to avoid the violence, and some of them become extremely hyper-violent, and some of them even start cannibalizing each other. Does that remind you of anything? Anyway, let me move on. I don't want to scare too many people here. I'm trying to do an astrology video. God. You'd never know. Anyway, greetings. So here's a map of the Earth with some lines that illustrate the big major tectonic plates across the world. Over here, this is North America. This is the great plate that goes all the way down the Pacific, and it comes down South America, crosses over, and then that crosses over to the other side here, all the way down Alaska, around Japan, the South China Seas, and all the way over here around Australia and over to New Zealand. And that it's just like a cracked eggshell. It's constantly shifting and changing and grinding against each other depending on the gravitational pulls and pushes of the moment in time. But these are very, very well established, well studied, well understood tectonic plates. There's a few over here. There's a huge one down the middle of the Atlantic, and so on. A big one across the Indian Ocean. And there's another one right through Africa. Anyway, the point I'm trying to get to is tectonic shifts that are happening with people. The obvious tectonic shifts are when you see like a big earthquake, very, very common earthquake zones through here and through here and through here, where there's a lot of very active tectonic plate shifting. Places like here, they have very little going on in terms of massive earthquakes and so on, because they're in the interior stable regions of the tectonic plates. Over here in central Russia, it's pretty stable. Okay, up here in parts of Canada, it's pretty stable. Same thing with the Pacific. But everywhere else, it's constantly the plates are grinding on each other. Let me go to the charts a minute. So at the moment, you might have noticed, I was just talking about it earlier, we have all these retrograde planets, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto, all grinding away right now. And in any moment, we're going to have Uranus retrograde. We're already in the shadow. So, and the sun just shifted into Virgo, so that's more Earth energy. And here's the chart. If you recall, this is very similar to what we've been seeing for days now with this big fat grand Earth trine. Let me see if I can back it up. Okay, this is here's the 25th. Here's the 20th. Do you see the similarities between here and here? There it is. There is that. There is that. Here's the 16th of August. See that with the big north nodes squaring with Pluto? And 13th of August, the big green triangle did not yet appear properly. So anyway, it's going to be with us for a little bit longer. And what I was suggesting is that this offers a period of what I call great stabilization, what I think of as great stabilization, while a lot of sickness and disease and things that are dysfunctional with people are shining through. And it's very difficult to diagnose what's not working when you don't have a stable reference point. But when you have this big fat green Earth trine here with the big sextile in Pisces over here, what this indicates to me is we have this rare moment of clarity and stability in the physical material aspects, earthly aspects of this life, that allow anything and everything that's unstable, for example, on this axis here, in other words, the sickness of humanity, the sickness of people, to be more and more clearly exposed. And at the same time, because we're hovering back from Pluto and Aquarius, retrograde into Pluto and Capricorn, and we're going to move back into Aquarius soon, it's like we're getting the advance notice, so keep an eye out what's happening. Next, over here, we have Jupiter getting closer and closer to Uranus. So we're going to see more and more upheaval in the physiology of our planet. In other words, more crazy floods, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, flooding, all the big scary things that terrify people, because you can't fight nature at that scale. The other lingering aspect, of course, is the North Node in Aries being hard squared by Pluto in Capricorn. Again, to me it feels like there's tremendous pressure for people to get their acts together and discover, in perhaps very hard, painful ways, what is not working about your relationships. Could be anything. Loved ones, pets, spouses, children, co-workers, business, anything and everything where you have inadvertently allocated things into a relationship dynamic and put it onto autopilot because it's so much easier to do that rather than have to take full conscious responsibility and awareness and ownership of what's actually going on in your life, in your world, what's working and what's not working. And instead of blaming everything that's not working on someone else or the other person, you take full custody and ownership regardless of what's happening with other people and your relationships with other people. And that way you get much more of a sense of sovereignty of yourself in this lifetime. Of course, it's very, very difficult to do because a lot of people do not want to think. They do not want to lead. They do not want to take responsibility. They don't want to have to figure out solutions to problems. They want someone else to tell them what to do. And of course, that's the classic setup for certain politicians and leaders and everything to take advantage of people who are, I would call it spiritually lazy. And lo and behold, you have what we're witnessing on earth today. Billions of people willingly living under slavery and servitude according to the rules and dictates of these despotic, tyrannical masters who have taken full advantage of their positions of power, and they are using it against you, the people, we, the people, me, the people. They're doing that for their advantage at your expense. Let me move on. So, there were a few things that really jumped out to me as almost like shocking historical moments over the last few days where my jaw was dropping as everything I've been basically thinking about, talking about, being concerned about for a long time now reached a point of critical mass where the tectonic plates, which would have been looking like this, suddenly went like this. And there's no going back. And then one day later it's going to go like this, and then the other type of shift is when they go from here to here to here, or sometimes they go from here to here to here, or here. Either way, it's a tectonic shift, and these are irreversible, typically irreversible, and it's happening with people. And I'm always looking for, let's say, symptoms or events or circumstances that would illustrate this. And all of a sudden I was bombarded the other day. So I'm just going to share what I noticed. You may not believe any of what I'm talking about, or you might think it's complete nonsense, but I think it's highly correlated to the astrology. These are my little notes. I'm keeping it very, very basic. There's tons more going on, but I just wanted to focus on some specifically. Oh, by the way, sorry, I want to get back to this one here. With this aspect still very, very powerful, with Jupiter and Uranus both in Taurus, we're dealing with massive, expansive upheavals, restructuring, shock, and disruptions in the global financial system. We talked about it for a couple of years now, but it really reached a peak when we had those eclipses early on with the Scorpio-Taurus axis. But we've moved on from there, and now we're getting the next level of tectonic shifts. The tectonic core shift is from the world of fake money to the world of real money, however you want to think of that. Think of United States paper dollars as value by decree, and you think of a gold coin as value by belief in hard value. People trust gold. You can't always trust the fiat money. And of course, the world of fiat money, it's made up, it's all by decree, is starting to show its fragility in terms of being a massive, massive scheme that's designed to harvest the energy of we the people and stick it into the pockets of them, the so-called leaders. I should name names, maybe I shouldn't. Anyway, it's like the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, certain politicians, certain political groups, political leaders, and so on and so on. Stock markets, banks, bankers, the Federal Reserve, and so on and so on. It's theft. You can watch Mark Moss, you can watch Neil McCoy Ward, and other amazing channels regarding money. They can describe it to you. I have my own versions of the same story. I've already showed you this many, many times. This is my little book, Wealth, Money, Finance by Tarot Illumination. The big shift started happening, of course, global restructuring, January 2020. That was a massive tectonic shift, and we are still reverberating today. Now, let me go to this. Let's see if I can read them off here. You know what? Hold on. Let me just check in. So, the world, people, politics, nature is constantly evolving, constantly changing. What we see here is like a snapshot of a moment of history in our planet. There was a time when these chunks were all connected and disconnected and had a very different shape. But we're talking about a journey over 4.5 billion years. This journey that we see here, this impression that we see here is only a few 100 million years old. So that's nothing. And it's going to change, okay? And so-called climate is going to change as well. It's going to get hotter and it's going to get colder. It's going to get hotter, it's going to get colder over extended periods of time. But we as people, we can only imagine in very, very short, compressed little units of time, typically a lifetime, where we could see a few little ripples up and down, and we get terrified if it gets too hot or it gets too cold. I know I have very, very little tolerance for the extremes. I can handle cold. I cannot handle the heat. The heat is very deadly for me. The cold is easier to navigate. So, but it's different for everybody. Anyway, the things that jumped out at me. Let me go back to my little chart here. Number one, we've already talked about this plenty of times. The big things that have been happening, especially over the last few weeks, especially around the time of this, the massive, massive flooding events over here, on top of the massive financial implosions. This territory over here in purple has a certain name, CHINA. It's imploding, okay? Different things are happening in different places. Massive drought and desertification is happening all over here. Deforestation here. Massive fires all over here. We had a catastrophic fire over here in the Hawaiian Islands. We had, it's never ending. I just wanted to illustrate some common popular headlines recently. Let me just go through my little list and we can expand from there if we have to. The other night, there's been a big political build-up, if you've noticed inside America, political buildup, like the pro this and the pro that, the anti this, the anti that, and things are getting extremely polarized, as would be expected when you have Pluto in Capricorn at the critical degrees. It's going to stretch on for the rest of this year and the whole of 2024 and into 2025. We're going to live with an intense degree of compression that feels like people are being forced to take a side. You're either a Republican or a Democrat. You're a hardcore communist or you're a right-wing extremist. And there's no in-betweens. A lot of people don't want to choose, so they try to stay invisible and pretend like nothing's happening. But ultimately, if you want to enjoy the good things about living in this place, it would help if you make a choice and live with your choices accordingly. I'm not going to tell you how to choose. I already know how I'm going to choose. Some of you know my opinions already. Anyway, there was a show the other night. Was it last night or the night before? Well, actually 3 events in a row, almost simultaneously, within a matter of hours. Our friend Donald has been indicted yet again, and he was forced to go into the Fulton County Jail over in Atlanta, Georgia, and a mugshot was taken along with 18 of his other buddies, and that mugshot is now world famous, of course. It's going to be on t-shirts and coffee cups everywhere. If you haven't seen it, I'll see if I can find it for you. The next evening, actually, I think it was the evening before, our fellow Tucker Carlson had an interview with Donald Trump. And that was the same evening that Fox News station had a so-called presidential debate. And what was interesting about it is that these two were completely disconnected. But it's all about trying to get things hyped up and ready for the elections in the next year and so. And at this moment in time, right from the time of this video, the Tucker Trump interview with Donald has already reached it's actually over 260 million views within like 36 hours. That is just mind-boggling. That's the biggest visual event in pretty much internet history. In contrast, this major network debate, they've pulled about 150,000 views, so it's kind of pathetic. All of that happened simultaneously, and from my perspective, what it did was light up the extreme disparities of what's happening in America. We're seeing these outrageous actions from the so-called hard left, and it's being reciprocated by the so-called right. And it's becoming very, very, very obvious to the point where even the mainstream media cannot not report about it. Of course, they're going to spin it that this fellow Donald is a complete, utter criminal, needs to be behind bars, and so on and so on. And of course, the other side of the coin is that this fellow Donald, his MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, America First, is expanding and growing ever more powerful. So in other words, the more and more and more the hardcore lefties push on the hardcore right wing, the more and more the right wing grows in power and status and credibility, and the more absurd the left wing becomes. And it's becoming so obvious. I should even talk about Uncle Joe and his administration, because he's in deep, deep trouble, and all the weaponized entities in Washington are trying to cover it up. But you get to a point where you can't cover up this stuff anymore. The stench of evil and crime is so bad that it's just leaking out everywhere. Anyway, I found all that very, very interesting, because to me, it represented a tectonic shift in human perception as happening live in real time. These 3 events happened almost simultaneously in real time. It was mind-boggling to witness, in my opinion. The next thing I noticed that became almost shocking to me was that this BRICS organization, okay, I'll show this to you, it's a group of countries that are trying to create an alternative to the American dollar. And it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America. It's called the BRICS. There it is. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America. They are expanding, and they had their big meeting in Johannesburg the other day, and they have invited several other countries to join, which is going to make BRICS much bigger and much more significant. And they are looking for, I would say, it's a completely different phenomenon to American unipolar hegemony that is, let's say, imposed on the rest of Earth. With the BRICS nations, what they're trying to do is set up what is more of like a nationalist organization of groups who all recognize and respect each other's countries and cultures and currencies, and they all interact together in a decentralized manner, rather than having to pivot everything that they do with world trade through the US dollar and then back into the other currency again. So it's happening right now, and there's no going back. You can't unwind what is happening here. This thing that happened this week, 1, 2, 3, this item number 4 here that happened this week is irreversible. I'm going to see if I can, let me see if I can find it on here and show you. I don't know if you can see this. This is a chart from the Visual Capitalist. The original BRICS countries are in red. Brazil, Russia, China, India, South America. As of yesterday, they've admitted, which is it? Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, hold on, I lost it. Ethiopia, and Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, and Argentina. Okay, so when you add all that up, that's pretty much half the population of the whole of Earth. And they're basically giving the middle finger to the United States and the United States dollar. The United States dollar is not going to implode overnight, like what's happening with the Chinese yuan. But this is a tectonic shift, okay? Also, we have other countries that are applying. These are the big ones right now. They're not, the names are, I haven't got them here, but you can see, I think it's Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia, Congo, Libya, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Turkey, and I think Belarus. Anyway, it's expanding. And that's going to change everything. Okay, that's just the people reorganizing themselves in a way that basically says America to the US dollar. Poopy dollar. And so they don't know really what's going to happen in terms of how they actually do exchange of currencies and exchange of trade. But there are things that are happening, again, in a totally separate realm, but they all overlap. This section here I'm talking about relates to Jupiter and Uranus, both in Taurus, grinding through with this staggering upheaval and disruption in the global financial system. It's now happening very obviously in real time, and it's going to accelerate and expand even more, especially when Jupiter gets very, very, very close to Uranus. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting close. Now, at the same time, for quite a long time now, the global financial system, which is really centered around the United States and the United States dollar, that is coming under tremendous pressure to change. The way that global trade happens right now, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars every day exchanged, as people are opening and closing their deals and transactions to move stuff, goods and services across the world. And all of that, pretty much all of it, is done in US dollars, especially when it comes to oil. And it's becoming a real problem for everywhere else in the world, because they want to basically mind their own business with their own currencies. So that's a big problem for America. And the basically the global banking system, which is organized from here and from here. At the very pinnacle, we have the Bank of International Settlements, okay? At the secondary levels, we have the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and so on. And we have the United States Federal Reserve, the United States Treasury, and the United States government that pretty much operate all of that in collusion with Wall Street. The big banks, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, all the other mega-trillion-dollar asset management firms. The famous one is BlackRock with Larry Fink, and all affiliated with the World Economic Forum. Anyway, the thing is that the Bank of International Settlements is the very, very, very pinnacle of global banking. And that's where all the big trillions of dollars move in and out every day through a thing called the SWIFT system, which is from the 1970s. It's sort of like very, before the days of emails, but it would be a messaging system that verifies the transaction coming in, holding itself stable to confirm, and then moving it over to here to close out the transaction. And it's become obsolete and redundant. And there is a new system that is emerging that replaces it, which happens in seconds at almost zero cost. And of course, that is extremely destabilizing for the global status quo of finance. The global status quo knows that and understands it. So guess what? They've decided if you can't beat them, join them. Right now, the Bank of International Settlements has done its first major deal with China. It's called Enbridge, and it uses a system called, I believe, the Ripple Network, digital ledger technology, and the XRP token to make this thing happen. It's pretty much identical to what is being integrated throughout the rest of the world. It's going to happen. Okay, let's just put it that way. And people don't like to talk about it because it sounds like, oh, I'm trying to, talk about cryptos and say this is the best thing or ever. It's technology. This is financial technology. It's not quite what I would call money, but there is extreme value here. And if people want to, they can go and study this online, YouTube channels or whatever. Google Ripple, Google XRP, and so on and so on. And what's happening now, the International Monetary Fund, which is a second-tier banking system, is very, very stressed about the BIS taking the lead without asking permission. And the IMF is saying, well, wait a minute. Oh, what about America and the SWIFT system and the US dollar? You, sir, are trying to usurp us, sir, and we don't like that. And then the BIS is like, well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stop. You guys have to figure it out. So what's happening is that, like it or not, everything is going to convert over the next few years, decade, or 20 years or so, especially with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini coming up years from now. Simultaneously, we're going to see a massive change in the global financial system, and that is going to include CBDCs for everybody. Central bank digital currencies. That, of course, if you're not aware, that is a form of financial slavery, financial imprisonment by the elites who want to control all of us, the people. So study that if you want to find a way to try and retain some of your sovereign freedom. Okay? I just thought I would mention these things. There's so much other stuff going on. There's the big war over here, all the wars over here, all the revolutions and upheaval, the catastrophic inflation in Argentina, in Zimbabwe, in Pakistan, in Lebanon. It's really, really frightening. The implosion of the Chinese economy over here, while they simultaneously become extremely outwardly aggressive over here, and so on and so on. It's all happening simultaneously. Also, it's becoming very obvious about the dereliction and the decay of what's happening in this beautiful place here. This is where I live, right here. So we've talked about that many times. 1776 revisited. That is all represented by this energy here, and it's going to continue to be that way for the next 20 years or so. Okay, so I'm just giving you a reminder. I was talking with Love Triber again the other day, and I was saying, hey, do you remember that expression? And let me see if I can do it like this. And it involves, actually, let me go back to a chart here. Let me go back to this chart from the other day. Okay, remember this little chart that I showed you? This represents the Pluto cycle. Every 250 years we have a Pluto return. The famous one was 1776, the birth of what we call today the United States, 4th of July, and we're now coming to the very, very end of the cycle and the beginning of the new one, around 2024. 2025. So with Pluto, it's all about the Scorpio 8th house energy, other people's money, birth, procreation, death, repeat, repeat, repeat. And when you follow these economic cycles, which are very well illustrated by a fellow called Ray Dalio, who is an extremely wealthy fund manager, multi-billions and billions, he has studied these cycles. He has no clue that they are connected directly with Pluto, but he has noticed that there are very, very clear, defined cycles in world history, and it follows this path. Mark Moss, again, an amazing financial teacher, describes the same things, but again, he has no clue that they are correlated directly with the life cycle of Pluto. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to get to is that we've reached the end here. And if you want to divide it into chunks, which is what happens in the birth and death of empires, typically things get very, very, very bumpy around this time. There's a lot of volatility and revolution and upheaval as people decide they've had enough of an old regime, an old system, and they want to recalibrate and restart a new regime, a new system, better than the one before. And the biggest one to date ever in history was this one here. That was the birth of a system of operating where the people theoretically are in charge, and we hire people to work in office and administrate things for our benefit. It never used to be that way. All these cycles represent the cycles of empires, monarchs, kings, emperors, despots, tyrants. And the people here said enough is enough. So they flipped it all around. And in America, it's we the people who have our beautiful Constitution. And everything is rewritten and designed so that we the people understand that we're not stupid, and we can see what's going on, and we are going to elect people to administer our needs on the larger scale so that the whole country can prosper, as opposed to being slaves and serfs of an evil monarch or an evil emperor. So anyway, look at it. Let's break it up into 4 chunks. Hard times breed strong men. I'm talking about men because it's usually the men who take these leadership positions. Hard times breed strong men. Strong men breed good times. The pinnacle here. Good times breed weak men. We're now here. Weak men breed disaster and decay and devolution. Okay? Do you see the path? So things were at their most optimal in America, despite all the crazy chaos and, let's say, less than noble things that happen in America. There are some amazing things about America which pretty much everyone else, a lot of other people would wish they could have. But I'm just going to state that thing again because this evolutionary cycle is let's say, expressed through human behavior, because this is how we see the cycles behave. So again, I'm going to see if I can describe it again. Hard times, tough times breed strong men. Strong men breed good times, and prosperity, strength, power. Good times at the pinnacle of all of that prosperity and power breed weak men, because they're basically spoiled. Everything's already been done for them. And they get to the point where the good times breed weak men, because they don't have to do anything. And that breeds the devolution and the end of it. So that's what we're seeing now in the United States. We're seeing the implosion of the United States. You could call it the American Empire. And we're going to go through a massive tectonic upheaval, and it will be rebirthed in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, there's much more that I'd like to talk about, but this is way more than enough right now to digest. So I'm going to say farewell. I hope you get something out of this. I hope I didn't confuse people or alienate too many people. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe and do the bell and all those good things. It really, really helps. Bye.